I came home after a brutal 14-hour shift, sweat dripping, legs aching, just dreaming of my bed when I saw something that made my blood boil. Two massive luxury SUVs were parked tightly in my private driveway, completely blocking my entrance. One was Karen's, the HOA president who lived for drama, and the other belonged to her overconfident, loudmouthed mother. They laughed as they stepped out like they owned the street. Karen once said I didn't deserve the spot just because I wasn't part of their inner circle. That night, they crossed a line, and I had just the plan ready. See, what they didn't know was I wasn't just a tired homeowner, I had a tow truck driver on speed dial, waiting for this exact moment. No warnings, no more begging. I was done being nice. If they thought they could walk over me, they were about to be in for a very expensive surprise. 6 months ago, I bought my dream home in a quiet-looking HOA neighborhood. I paid extra for a clearly stated, legally documented private parking space. It was written right into my property deed. I thought peace finally found me, but I didn't realize I had just moved next to Karen, the HOA president from hell. From the day I arrived, she had something to say. My truck was too big, my dog barked too much, and I didn't match the community vibe. I ignored her little jabs, thinking she'd get bored. But she didn't. She escalated. The final straw, she and her mom started using my driveway like their personal parking lot. I asked politely. I warned her once. She smirked and said, "We run this place." That's when I decided if Karen wanted to play games, I'd rewrite the rules. And my first move? It involved a tow truck and a camera rolling. The very next morning, after Karen mocked me about running the place, I woke up to find a shiny, white Lexus SUV parked right in front of my garage, completely blocking my way out. I instantly recognized it. It was Karen's mother's car, the same woman who always wore oversized sunglasses and looked at me like I didn't belong there. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she stopped briefly, so I waited. 5 minutes, then 10. When no one came out, I walked across the street and rang Karen's bell. She opened the door with that usual smirk glued to her face and a coffee mug in her hand, like she had all the time in the world. I kept calm and said, "Hey, your mom's blocking my garage. I have to leave for work." She didn't apologize. She just rolled her eyes and said, "It's just for 10 minutes. Chill." Then she shut the door before I could say another word. 10 minutes passed, then 30, then a full hour. I paced, called twice, no response. After nearly 4 hours of waiting, her mom casually walked out, talking on the phone, completely ignoring me, and drove off like she hadn't just ruined my entire morning. That was the first time I realized this wasn't just carelessness, it was power play. They knew what they were doing. I missed my appointment that day, lost half a day's pay. But I stayed quiet, took a breath, and thought maybe it was just a what-I'm thing. But that quiet didn't last. Just 3 days later, Karen's mom parked there again, this time in the afternoon. I confronted her directly and said, "Ma'am, this is my property. You can't park here." She looked me up and down and said, "Oh please, don't be so dramatic. We've lived here 20 years. No one ever cared before you." I told her I did care. I told her I paid for that spot. But all I got in return was a sarcastic laugh and a talk to Karen about it. And when I did, Karen shrugged and said, "My mom's old. She doesn't need this stress." That was rich. They were the ones causing stress. I started documenting everything, every parking violation, every blocked exit, every smug insult. I even printed out the HOA bylaws showing my exclusive rights to that space and kept them on hand. I emailed the HOA board, but guess what? Karen never forwarded my complaint. She simply replied, "Your concerns have been noted," and did nothing. I later found out she was deleting any messages that made her look bad. That's when I knew this wasn't going to stop until I made it stop. So, I started researching the law. I found out I had every right to tow vehicles from my driveway without notice, if they were unauthorized. I even called the local police to confirm. They told me as long as I had ownership documents and a photo record, I was good to go. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because I was scared, but because I was finally ready to fight back. The next morning, I parked my car slightly angled in my own driveway to see if they'd still try to fit in. Sure enough, by noon, Karen's mom pulled in and squeezed her SUV beside mine, blocking me again. She didn't even knock. She didn't care. But this time, I didn't go to the door. I went straight to my phone. I called the tow truck company I'd already prearranged. "It's time," I said. They arrived in 12 minutes. While the driver was hooking up the SUV, Karen came running out in slippers, shouting, "What do you think you're doing?" I didn't flinch. I showed her the documents, showed her the videos. She tried to stand in front of the truck, but the driver said, "Mum, step aside or the police will be called." Her mother came out yelling, threatening lawsuits, but neither of them realized they had no legal ground to stand on. That SUV was gone in minutes, and the best part, Karen had to personally pay the $350 towing fee because the tow yard wouldn't release the car without proof of ownership, and her mother wasn't even listed on the title. That moment, watching Karen hold her mother back from lunging at me while the SUV disappeared down the road, was the moment I knew I had just started a war. But this time, I was going to win it my way. After that first tow, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally get the message. But I underestimated just how entitled and petty Karen and her mother could be. For a few days, things were quiet. No blocked driveway, no sarcastic comments, just silence. I started to relax, thinking the worst had passed. But then, the following Thursday, while I was stuck at work covering for a sick co-worker, I got a notification on my phone from my driveway security camera. I opened the app, and what I saw nearly made me crush my phone in anger. Karen's SUV pulled up, followed closely by her mother's Lexus. Without hesitation, they both parked in my driveway again, just like nothing had happened. And this time, it wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. Karen stepped out of her car, looked directly into the camera, smirked, and said loud and clear, "He doesn't deserve this spot anyway. We were here before him." Her mother laughed and added, "Let him call the tow truck again. I'll just get it back like last time." I couldn't believe what I was watching. They knew I wasn't home. They knew I couldn't stop them in the moment. But what they didn't know was I had upgraded my security system. Not only was it recording everything in full HD, it also synced automatically with my cloud storage, and I could speak through it live. I pressed the mic and calmly said, "Smile for the camera, Karen. You've just trespassed again, and this time, I have everything saved." Karen paused for a second, looked right into the lens, and said mockingly, "Good. Show whoever you want. I'm the HOA president. They won't do a thing." That was her mistake. She had gotten too confident, too careless. She thought she was untouchable. But this time, I had a different plan. Instead of towing them immediately, I waited. I didn't want just a tow. I wanted consequences that would stick. That night, I came home and didn't even confront them. I simply downloaded the footage, printed out my property deed, and filed an official complaint to the county zoning board, not the HOA, because Karen controlled that. I also emailed a copy to the entire HOA committee, bypassing Karen completely. But I wasn't done. I also filed a police report, not to press charges just yet, but to have a formal record started. And then I called a real estate attorney I had been quietly consulting since the first tow. He reviewed everything, the video, the documents, the HOA bylaws, and smiled. "This is gold," he said. "You've got them, and if they push you again, I'll handle it personally." The next morning, Karen showed up at my door, looking smug and holding a cup of coffee like she always did. When she was about to throw her weight around, "Just so you know," she said, "we'll be needing that spot again tomorrow. There's a community event." I replied, "That's great. Just know this next time either of your vehicles touch my driveway, the police and my attorney will handle it. No more warnings, no more mercy." She tried to laugh it off, but I could see the flicker of nervousness in her eyes that scared her more than the tow truck. Still, later that day, when I checked my camera again, Karen's mother had the nerve to walk her dog across my property and throw her coffee cup into my recycling bin, as if marking territory. I didn't react. I didn't open my door. I just smiled, took a screenshot, and added it to the growing case file. I was done playing defense. Karen thought she had the power, but the truth was I had the law, the footage, and the patience. She had no idea that every smug little move she made was now working against her. She wanted war. And I had finally learned how to win one the smart way. I wasn't just going to get their cars towed, I was going to get Karen removed from the HOA entirely. And that plan was already in motion. Asterisk asterisk. The next morning, after saving every frame of video and filing my report with the zoning board, I decided to take one last shot at resolving this the peaceful way. I sent an official complaint to the HOA through their online portal, clearly attaching my deed, the updated HOA bylaws, and 3 high-resolution screenshots of Karen and her mother parking illegally on my property. I even included a timestamped screenshot of Karen's smug little speech to the camera about how I didn't deserve the spot. I thought maybe, just maybe, the rest of the board would finally step in. But by evening, I received a response. Not from the HOA board as a group, from Karen herself as the acting president. Her reply was only 2 lines long. After review, your concern has been dismissed. The driveway in question is considered shared community space. Case closed. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Shared community space? That's not just inaccurate, it's a complete lie. I immediately pulled out my deed again. Right from the property folder I kept near my desk, the document clearly described my driveway as exclusive use property, not even under HOA control. I had it signed, sealed, and notarized. What Karen didn't expect was I wasn't just some quiet new neighbor. I was a business analyst by profession, trained to find loopholes, track paper trails, and build evidence. She may have had a title, but I had facts, and facts win wars. So instead of replying to Karen, I contacted the HOA board members directly. Not through the portal she controlled, but through public records and community contact lists. I sent them everything. I explained the situation, attached video clips, and added copies of the documents. 2 members replied the same night, shocked. One even said, "Wait, that space is deeded to you." Karen never told us that. That's when it clicked. Karen had been deleting complaints, filtering emails, and abusing her access. She wasn't just bending rules, she was silencing anyone who challenged her control. And the board? They had no idea. For months, she'd used her position to create a bubble of power, pretending to speak on behalf of the HOA while shutting out anything that exposed her. I realized this wasn't just about a parking space anymore. This was about corruption, ego, control, and I was done being quiet. I drafted a formal complaint addressed to all board members, titled Request for Emergency Vote to Remove President, and I backed every line with screenshots, dates, quotes, footage, and legal property descriptions. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I built a case like a lawyer, preparing for court. And while Karen was busy sipping her overpriced coffee and throwing whole letters at people she didn't like, I was preparing a legal hammer. The next morning, I saw Karen walking her dog with her usual air of fake superiority. She waved at me, sarcastically, and said, "Hope you've learned your place here." I just smiled. "You'll be hearing from your board very soon," I replied. Her smirk faded for just a second. She didn't like not knowing what was coming. That same night, the board called a virtual emergency session. Karen tried to control it, but this time, the majority voted to mute her during the discussion. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. My evidence did the talking. The next day, I received an email. Karen has been temporarily suspended as HOA president pending formal investigation. I stared at it for a moment, letting the words sink in. The woman who claimed she ran the neighborhood had finally been silenced by her own rules. But I wasn't done yet, because during all this chaos, I discovered something even bigger. Karen's mom. She wasn't even officially registered as a guest or resident legally. She had no right to park or walk on HOA property at all. That opened up a whole new door, and I was about to walk right through it with paperwork in one hand and justice in the other. After Karen's suspension was officially confirmed, I knew she wouldn't go down without trying to claw her way back into power. People like her, controlling, arrogant, and entitled, don't handle defeat well. I had shaken her foundation, but if I wanted this to end once and for all, I had to dig deeper, past her fake smile, past her HOA title, and into the very structure she had hidden behind for years. So I went straight into the source, the original HOA bylaws. not the sugar-coated PDF Karen had posted online. I requested them directly from the county office and waited 3 business days. When they arrived, I pored over every page like a detective chasing a final clue. And there it was, Section 14. Subdivision C stated in bold, driveway 1 to be is deeded to the property owner and excluded from shared community access. That was my spot, my land, not HOAS, not Karen's, mine. That one sentence changed everything. Not only had Karen lied to my face and to the board, but she had been knowingly abusing her power, trespassing, and authorizing illegal parking on someone else's private property. That's when it clicked. I didn't need to just defend my space. I needed to set a trap and catch her in the act legally, publicly, and with evidence that couldn't be denied. So I started preparing. First, I printed that section of the bylaws, laminated it, and mounted it next to my driveway on a new private sign that read, "Private property, no parking, towed at owner's expense." I even had a small camera installed right above it, zoomed directly on the sign and the driveway. Next, I updated my camera system to send instant alerts to my phone and cloud if motion was detected in that area. And finally, I called the same tow truck company I'd used before and struck a new deal. Keep a truck nearby in the area. I told the owner, I'll pay extra for priority response. I'm expecting repeat offenders. He agreed. Everything was set. Now all I had to do was wait. And I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, I got the notification at exactly 3:47 p.m. I opened the app and watched it unfold in real time. Karen's mother pulling up again, this time alone, slowly backing her Lexus into my driveway like nothing had changed. The sign, she looked at it, squinted, then laughed and parked anyway. Within seconds, the camera picked up her saying to someone on the phone, "I don't care what that sign says. That boy's just playing games. That boy." I smiled and hit record. I immediately called the tow company. "She's back," I said. "Get her." They arrived in under 10 minutes. As the tow truck backed up, Karen's mom rushed outside, flailing her arms, yelling, "You can't tow me. This is community property." The driver pointed to the sign and the paperwork I'd pre-signed, then began hooking up the car without a single word. That's when Karen herself came running down the street, still technically suspended but clearly trying to regain control. "Stop this now," she screamed. "This is abuse. I'll call the board." But the board wasn't on her side anymore, and neither was the law. I calmly stepped out of my house, holding the laminated bylaws in one hand and my phone in the other, already recording. "This is Section 14, Sub C," I said loud enough for both cameras to hear. "Private property, no shared access. You've trespassed again, Karen, and this time, your mom's car is going straight to impound." Karen froze. She knew she'd been cornered. Her mom started crying, yelling about medical conditions and how she didn't know. But ignorance isn't a defense when it's the 3rd time. The tow truck rolled away with her Lexus, and I stood there as they watched helplessly. That moment wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my space, my rights, and my peace. Karen turned red with rage, but deep down, she knew her little kingdom had started to collapse. And the best part, I wasn't even finished yet. After Karen's mom's car was towed a 2nd time, I could see the cracks forming in their confidence. Karen didn't march around like she used to, and her mother stopped walking across my yard like it was her personal garden. But I knew better than to trust silence from people like them. Their egos were too fragile, and the way they looked at me whenever I stepped outside, Karen glaring with tight lips, and her mother pretending not to see me, told me they weren't done. Not yet. They were just waiting for the right moment to strike again, probably hoping I'd let my guard down. That's when I decided to move from defense to full offense. I wasn't just going to wait and react. I was going to plan, prepare, and make sure the next time they tried anything, it would cost them more than just towing fees. So I picked up the phone and called an old friend of mine, Derek, who ran a local tow truck company. We'd gone to school together, and I'd helped him with some business paperwork a few years back. So when I explained my situation, he was more than willing to help. I said, "I need a truck nearby every evening after 4 p.m. If either of those cars show up in my driveway, no warning, no call, just take them. both of them. No questions asked. Derek laughed and said, "Man, you sound like you're about to start a war." I replied, "It already started. I'm just finishing it the smart way." We agreed on a weekly schedule. He had a driver patrolling within 5 minutes of my place every evening. I even gave him a printed copy of my deed and the updated sign by my driveway just to keep everything legal and above board. I also upgraded my motion sensors to trigger silent alerts to my phone. No lights, no beeping, just instant notifications. I wanted Karen and her mom to feel like they got away with it. Right until the hook lifted their cars off the ground. The first few days, nothing happened. They didn't park near me. They didn't even look at my house. But on Friday exactly, a week after the last tow, my phone buzzed at 6:13 p.m. I checked the camera feed, and there they were, Karen's black SUV and her mother's white Lexus, bold as ever, both parked diagonally in my driveway, their bumpers nearly touching my garage door. Karen got out and stood there for a second, looked around, and smiled at the empty street like she had finally won. She even took a selfie. Her mother stepped out and lit a cigarette like she was celebrating. I didn't say a word. I didn't go outside. I simply texted Derek one word, "Now." 13 minutes later, the tow truck came rolling down the road, headlights off, engine low. Karen didn't even notice until the metal clank of the hook hit her back tire. She ran out screaming, hey, you can't do that." But this time, Derek's driver had body cam footage, a printed contract, and a city license in his glove box. Karen's mom started shouting louder than ever before, yelling about harassment and property rights, until I walked outside, calm as ever, holding my phone recording every second. "That's strike 3, I said. "You knew the rules, you read the sign, you ignored the law, again." Karen pointed her finger in my face and yelled, "You're ruining this neighborhood." I looked her dead in the eyes and replied, "No, I'm cleaning it up." She tried calling someone, maybe a lawyer, maybe the board, but it didn't matter anymore. The SUV was gone, the Lexus was gone, and the tow yard this time had new policies. Both cars would stay locked until all storage fees, paperwork, and proof of ownership were provided. By the end of the weekend, they owed nearly $1,100 combined, and I hadn't lifted a finger, just prepared smartly and let their arrogance do the rest. That night, I sat on my porch with a cold drink, watching the security feed rewind over and over again, smiling every time the truck pulled up. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about control, and now I had all of it. That evening, I decided to set the perfect trap. I parked my spare car halfway out of my driveway, just enough to make it look like someone was still using the space, but also bait enough to lure Karen and her mother in. It was a calculated move. I wanted them to think the spot was available, but also make it tricky enough so they'd squeeze their cars in dangerously close, guaranteeing I'd have full proof of their reckless parking and disrespect for my property. I watched the clock on my phone anxiously, the security camera feed live on my screen, ready for every moment. Around 7 p.m., just as I predicted, a familiar pair of headlights appeared at the entrance of the street. It was Karen's black SUV, followed closely by her mother's white Lexus. They pulled up, laughing loudly, as if the whole neighborhood belonged to them. Karen honked twice, her voice carrying over the quiet street as she said, "Mom, this spot's ours now." I smiled, silently, and waited. They squeezed both vehicles into my driveway, the bumpers almost touching the garage door, leaving barely a foot for any other car. Karen's mom got out first, lighting a cigarette with a smirk, clearly enjoying the stunt. Karen was on her phone, probably texting their usual HOA allies or friends, bragging about how they were taking over his spot. But this time, I was ready. My tow truck friend Derek was parked 2 blocks away, his driver ready and waiting for the signal. I dialed Derek and whispered, "Darren, proceed." Almost immediately, the tow truck started moving quietly toward my driveway. Karen and her mom didn't notice at first, too busy arguing about some petty neighborhood drama. Then, just as the driver began hooking Karen's SUV's front wheel, Karen spotted him. She screamed, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" But it was too late. The driver calmly said, "This is private property, ma'am. You're parked illegally." Karen tried to block the hook with her hands, but Derek's driver was firm. Karen's mother came running outside, yelling, "You can't tow my car. We live here." I walked out with my phone, recording everything, my voice steady as I said, "Actually, you don't live here legally. You're trespassing, and this spot belongs to me." Karen looked stunned. I showed her the laminated bylaws next to the driveway sign and the deed documents in my hand. "You've been warned multiple times. No more chances." The tow truck driver finished hooking up the SUV and started pulling it away. Then the driver quickly hooked up the white Lexus. Karen's mom dropped her cigarette and shouted, "This is harassment. You'll regret this." But I didn't flinch. I just kept recording as their angry shouts filled the air. Karen called the HOA board, but this time they didn't answer. The emergency vote had suspended her, remember? No one was coming to their rescue. As the tow truck drove both SUVs away, I felt a deep satisfaction. This was my victory. I had outsmarted them, taken control, and enforced my rights without violence or threats, just patience, planning, and legal backing. As they stood on the sidewalk, furious and helpless, I raised my phone and asked loudly, "So, Karen, how's that HOA presidency feeling now?" The neighbors who had gathered whispered and nodded in approval. For the first time, Karen and her mom looked small and powerless. But the best twist? I later found out Karen's mother wasn't even officially registered as a resident or guest in the neighborhood. That was a violation punishable by law, so I submitted that info to the county, pushing the case even further. The whole neighborhood was watching now, and my story wasn't just about a parking spot anymore. It was about justice, respect, and standing up to bullies. I leaned back on my porch, watching the empty driveway, feeling the sweet taste of revenge, mixed with relief. Karen had lost more than a parking spot that night. She lost control, and this time, she wasn't coming back. The moment Karen and her mom squeezed their SUVs into my driveway that evening, I knew it was time to act. I had my phone ready, camera app already open and recording. As I stepped outside, I waved discreetly to Derek's tow truck driver waiting just 2 blocks away. The driver gave me a quick nod, understanding exactly what to do. I took a deep breath and hit record, making sure every second was captured, from the look on Karen's face to her mother's smirk turning into shock. Minutes later, the quiet rumble of the tow truck grew louder as it rolled closer, headlights low to avoid drawing attention from nosy neighbors. Karen was still chatting on her phone, probably bragging about how they were taking back their spot. Suddenly, the driver expertly hooked Karen's black SUV's front wheel. Karen froze, her mouth falling open as she realized what was happening. She ran out screaming, "No, you can't tow my car. This is harassment." But I stayed calm, filming every moment. I showed her the property deed, the private parking sign, and the HOA bylaws laminated beside the driveway. "You've been warned," I said steadily. "This is my private property. You're parked illegally." And this is the 3rd time. Karen's mother came rushing out too, yelling about medical conditions and unfair treatment, but her words were drowned out by the tow truck's metal chains tightening. The driver worked fast and precise, hooking the white Lexus just moments after Karen's SUV was hooked. Both vehicles were lifted from the ground, tires dangling as the trucks started pulling away from the driveway. Karen screamed louder, running after the tow truck, banging on the windows, begging, "Please, please stop. You can't do this to me." But it was too late. Derek's driver kept moving, knowing he was legally clear with all the documentation in hand. I kept recording, making sure nothing was missed, as the tow truck turned the corner, taking both SUVs far from the neighborhood. The weight of the moment settled in. I had finally taken control. No more disrespect, no more trespassing, no more playing their game. I stood on my porch, the glow of my phone screen illuminating my face as I reviewed the footage. This wasn't just a personal win, it was a message to Karen, her mother, and the entire neighborhood. The arrogant, entitled days were over. The next day, Karen tried to rally support, sending angry texts to the HOA board and local neighbors. But most had already heard the story or seen the videos I shared. She even tried to claim I was bullying her family. But with the official property deeds and multiple warnings on record, her claims fell flat. To add salt to the wound, I discovered that Karen's mother wasn't even an official resident or guest, which meant her repeated trespassing and illegal parking could result in fines or further legal action. I submitted this new information to the county, ensuring the situation would be taken seriously by authorities beyond the HOA. Neighbors, who once avoided me, began approaching, offering support and thanking me for standing up to Karen's tyranny. Some even shared their own stories of Karen's overreach, creating a ripple effect that began to isolate her further. Meanwhile, I stayed focused on my goal: peace and respect for my property. I installed extra security cameras, reinforced my driveway signs, and maintained constant communication with Derek's tow company to ensure quick action if the SUVs ever dared to return. Months later, Karen was officially removed from her HOA president position. The investigation into her misuse of power and harassment ongoing. Her mother faced penalties for trespassing, and me, I finally had the peace I deserved. Looking back, it wasn't just about towing cars, it was about standing firm, using the law, and turning the tables on those who thought they were above it all. Karen and her mom thought they could bully me into submission, but in the end, I was the one who had the last laugh. The very next morning, I heard a loud banging on my front door. It was Karen. Her face was red, eyes wild, and voice shaking with anger. "You had no right to tow our cars," she shouted before I even opened the door. I stayed calm, opened it slowly, and invited her inside. She stormed in, pacing the living room like she owned the place. "This is my neighborhood. You can't just do whatever you want," she yelled, slamming her fist on my coffee table. I sat down, picked up my property deed from the table, and placed it in front of her. "Karen," I said quietly but firmly, "this is my property, legally deeded to me. You parked without permission 3 times now. I gave warnings, I documented everything, and I acted within the law." She scoffed, "You're just trying to make me look bad." I smiled and pulled out my phone, showing her the security footage of her and her mother parking in my driveway, ignoring the no parking sign. The videos played on loop, showing every moment their smug faces, their laughter, their blatant disrespect. Karen's jaw dropped as she watched. "This can't be real," she muttered. Then I brought out the HOA bylaws, specifically the clause that stated my driveway was private property, excluding any shared use. "This isn't about personal grudges," I explained. "It's about respecting boundaries and following the rules. Rules that you, as HOA president, are supposed to uphold." She looked like she wanted to argue, but found no words. Instead, she sat down heavily, defeated. "You humiliated me," she finally said, voice cracking. "You took my power away." I shook my head. "I didn't take anything. You lost it by breaking the rules and abusing your position." Over the next hour, we talked more calmly. Karen admitted she had let her ego control her decisions, and that she never expected me to stand my ground so firmly. She warned me that some HOA members might still support her, but I told her I had the board's support now, and the investigation into her conduct was serious. Before leaving, she hesitated, then quietly said, "I hope you understand what you've started." I nodded. "I do, and I'm ready for whatever comes next." As she walked out, I felt a strange mix of relief and satisfaction. It wasn't just about winning the fight, it was about setting a precedent. I wasn't going to let anyone bully me or disrespect my property again. Later that week, I received official notice that Karen had resigned as HOA president, and a new board election was scheduled. The neighborhood was abuzz with talks of fairness and respect, and I found myself being thanked by neighbors who'd long suffered under Karen's rule. I kept the driveway sign up, but the tension was gone. I had peace. The lesson: sometimes standing firm and using the law is the best revenge, and when you do it right, the truth always wins. Asterisk. Just when I thought the storm with Karen was settling down, her mother decided to enter the drama herself. It started a few days after Karen's meltdown and resignation. I was watering my garden when I saw her walking toward me, holding a thick envelope and wearing a serious expression that screamed trouble. She stopped in front of me and said in a sharp tone, "You need to be careful." I've already talked to a lawyer about the towing. You're crossing a line. I smiled calmly, never letting her see I was rattled. That's interesting, I replied. The tow company I use is fully city approved, licensed, and operates within the law. If you or Karen wanted to take this further, good luck with that. Her eyes narrowed. You think you're so smart, don't you? Using the law to intimidate us. I shrugged. I'm just protecting what's mine. You both had your chance and ignored warnings. She scoffed and said, You don't know who you're dealing with. We have connections. I laughed softly. Connections don't trump proof, and I have enough evidence to shut down any false claim you make. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a threatening whisper. You'll regret this. We can make your life difficult. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, I'm ready for that. I've already documented everything you'd have done, every trespass, every threat, every insult. If you want to play hardball, I'll play harder. Her face flushed with anger but also a hint of respect, maybe even fear. She wasn't used to someone standing their ground like this. Over the next few days, she sent several emails filled with vague threats about lawsuits and harassment claims. But each time I responded calmly, attaching copies of the HOA bylaws, property deeds, and recorded footage of their illegal parking. The local tow company also confirmed their legal right to tow vehicles parked illegally on private property, and I shared that with her too. I even got a call from the city zoning office confirming the rules and regulations. Just to make sure, I had all bases covered. Karen's mom grew more frustrated, but never showed up again in person. Instead, she tried to rally neighborhood sympathy by spreading rumors that I was an unreasonable neighbor who enjoyed harassing an old woman. The neighborhood was divided for a while, but once I shared the actual proof and legal documents with several neighbors, their support swung fully my way. Some neighbors even admitted they had their own problems with Karen and her mother, but no one dared speak up before because Karen had the whole power. Now, with Karen gone and her mother isolated, the balance had shifted. The power was mine. One afternoon, I caught Karen's mom trying to sneak into the community clubhouse without a guest pass. I calmly stopped her, showed her the guest policy, and told her she would be reported for trespassing if she tried again. She glared but backed off. That moment sealed it for me. Her threats were all bluster, and her power had crumbled. I continued, documenting everything, ready for any new attempts, but they never came. The truth was clear. Karen and her mother had overstepped every boundary and finally faced consequences. The tow truck was no longer just a tool for parking enforcement. It became a symbol of justice and standing up to bullies, and I was the one who showed them that respect and lawfulness will always win over arrogance and entitlement. The very next morning after the showdown with Karen's mom, I found something unexpected waiting for me at my front door. Several official-looking letters taped to the wood. The top one read HOA violation notice, accusing me of harassment and creating disturbances in the neighborhood. My heart skipped for a second, but I stayed calm and read through all of them carefully. The letters were signed by none other than Karen herself, trying to make it look like an official HOA action. I knew this was her petty revenge, an attempt to drag me into trouble and scare me off. But instead of panicking, I decided to act smart. I immediately called the real HOA board, the members I had already contacted and who had supported me during Karen's suspension. I explained the situation and asked if any such violation notices had been filed or approved by them. To my relief, the board members were as shocked as I was. None of them had seen or authorized these letters. In fact, they told me Karen was acting alone, forging official notices and trying to intimidate me with fake documents. That was a serious breach of HOA rules and could lead to legal consequences. For Karen, armed with this confirmation, I took photos of the fake letters and saved the originals. Then, I emailed the board with all the evidence, including screenshots of the letters, timestamps, and a detailed explanation of what had happened. The board promised to launch an investigation into Karen's actions and warned that further attempts to spread false information could escalate the situation legally. Meanwhile, Karen's desperation was clear. The next day, I noticed small flyers posted around the neighborhood claiming that I was a troublemaker and disrupting community peace. These flyers bore no official HOA logo or signatures, and the handwriting looked suspiciously like Karen's. I collected those too and sent them along to the board. The neighborhood was buzzing, and I could sense some residents were confused, unsure whom to believe. That's when I decided to hold a community meeting open to all residents to clarify everything. I prepared a presentation with the timeline, all the documents, video clips, and official HOA statements. When the meeting day came, dozens showed up, including some who had never spoken to me before. I calmly presented the facts, answered questions, and showed proof that I had been nothing but respectful and law-abiding throughout the ordeal. By the end, the mood shifted. People started to see Karen's attempts as personal vendettas rather than official HOA business. Many neighbors even approached me afterward to apologize for not speaking up sooner and to thank me for standing strong. Karen's plan to turn the community against me had failed spectacularly. Instead, her own falsehoods were exposed, and the HOA board publicly condemned her unauthorized actions. The board also reminded all residents that any HOA notices or violations must come through official channels only, and forgery would not be tolerated. For the first time, Karen seemed truly isolated. She was no longer the powerful HOA president, with allies at her back. She was just a disgruntled former leader trying to salvage her pride with desperate moves. I stayed vigilant, but never retaliated in kind. I kept my focus on facts, evidence, and the law. The entire neighborhood now knew who was honest and who wasn't, and that truth gave me peace. Karen's fake letters and flyers were just the start of her downfall, but I was ready for whatever came next. This wasn't just a fight for a parking spot anymore. It was a battle for justice, reputation, and respect, and I was winning. After gathering all the fake violation letters, security footage, and proof of Karen's repeated abuse of power, I knew it was time to take the final step. I compiled everything into a detailed report, including timestamps, witness statements from neighbors who had grown tired of Karen's tyranny, and official documents proving my legal right to the parking spot. I sent this comprehensive evidence package to the HOA board, urging them to act swiftly and decisively. The response was immediate. The board called for an emergency meeting, inviting all members to review the shocking amount of misconduct Karen had committed. The atmosphere during the meeting was tense but charged with determination. Everyone wanted to see justice served, and with the mountain of evidence I provided, it was impossible to deny the truth. I attended the meeting, standing quietly in the back, watching as the board discussed Karen's actions, her repeated trespassing, falsification of documents, attempts to intimidate me, and misuse of her president powers to harass neighbors. Some members who had previously supported Karen looked uneasy, realizing they had been blinded by loyalty. After a long debate, the board held a vote. It was unanimous. Karen was removed as HOA president. Effective immediately, the room buzzed with whispers and relief. Karen's reign of control was officially over. But the real victory wasn't just about her losing the title, it was about reclaiming fairness and respect for every resident. Following the vote, the board issued a public statement condemning Karen's behavior and assuring all neighbors that strict policies would be put in place to prevent such abuses in the future. They also announced an upcoming election for a new president, encouraging residents to participate and ensure transparency moving forward. The news spread fast across the neighborhood. Many neighbors thanked me personally for standing up and gathering the proof needed to bring this change. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner, admitting they were afraid of Karen's power and influence. I reminded them that the strength of a community lies in standing together against injustice. As for Karen, she disappeared from most community events and communications. Her mother kept a low profile too, realizing their attempts to intimidate and manipulate had backfired spectacularly. I could see from afar that they were both struggling to repair their reputation, but the damage was done. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing I had done the right thing not just for myself, but for everyone living here. This whole experience taught me that standing firm with patience, evidence, and calm determination could overcome even the strongest bullies. It wasn't about revenge alone, it was about justice, boundaries, and respect. And now, the neighborhood was finally free from Karen's shadow. I sat on my porch one evening, looking at my driveway clear and quiet, thinking about how a simple parking spot had turned into a battle that changed everything. I smiled, knowing I had fought the fight the right way and won. After Karen's official removal as HOA president, the neighborhood finally started to breathe freely again. The tension that had gripped the streets for months slowly melted away, replaced by a new sense of peace and order. But the sweetest part of all was watching Karen and her mother face real consequences for their actions. The tow company sent official invoices demanding a total of $700 in towing and storage fees for both vehicles that had been removed from my private driveway. I made sure to keep copies of those bills and sent them to the HOA board as part of the ongoing case against them. Karen's mother was also hit with a firm ban from entering or parking on the property without prior approval, a restriction enforced by both the HOA and local authorities. This meant that her careless visits and arrogant parking stunts were over for good. It was satisfying to know that the power dynamic had shifted so completely. Karen and her mom, who once flaunted their status and thought they could walk all over me, now avoided me like I was a plague. Whenever I saw them around the neighborhood, they quickly looked away or hurried off in the opposite direction. Their silence spoke volumes. It was the sound of defeat and regret. Neighbors who had once feared speaking up now approached me openly, sharing how much they appreciated my courage to stand firm and fight for what was right. I started to realize that my small battle over a parking spot had turned into a symbol of resistance against bullying and corruption in our community. The HOA board also implemented clearer parking policies and strict enforcement measures, ensuring no one else could misuse their power or ignore the rules in the future. I kept my security system upgraded, but the real security came from knowing I had stood my ground and won. Reflecting on the whole ordeal, I felt a deep sense of pride. It wasn't about winning a petty argument anymore. It was about showing that respect and fairness must always come first, no matter how powerful the opposition. I had taken what was mine legally and protected it without resorting to threats or violence. I had let the law and truth speak louder than empty threats and intimidation. And the best part, watching Karen and her mother's downfall unfold, knowing that justice had been served without me ever lowering myself to their level. Every time I walked past my driveway now, clean and clear, I smiled, knowing it was a hard-earned victory, a victory for me, for my neighbors, and for the principle that no one is above the rules. Karen and her mom's reign of entitlement was finished, and I was the one who made sure of it. I later found out Karen's mom wasn't even on the leash. She was illegally staying there. But I let it slide. For now, I have all the evidence tucked away. Just in case things get worse again, it feels good to know the truth, and that I'm ready if they try anything more. This whole experience showed me how important it is to stand up for what's right and not let anyone push you around, even if they have power or titles. Karen thought she could bully me, but in the end, I was the one who set the rules. So, if your HOA president broke rules like this, what would you do? Would you tow their car too? Or maybe go even further? I want to know, because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or violent. It's smart, patient, and leaves them wondering what you'll do next. What's your move? Asterisk.